Call it pop culture, call it Western civilization, call it cultural degradation, whichever way. Today we are chewing on a very, very important, popular and very talked about, plus controversial discourse. World Heritage Day was celebrated in April, and African World Heritage Day is, as a matter of fact, today, the 5th of May 2023. All around the continent, this day is celebrated, and so we're taking that opportunity to talk about how culture is being watered down or fading away, as the case may be. On this day, African youths are urged to preserve and safeguard the rich African culture and the values at local, at regional, and global levels. Let me officially welcome you to today's episode of Fafanua Afrika. Now, this is a youth-based, conversational, and enlightening show where in less than 60 minutes, we take you through the topical, trending issues across the African continent that of course affect the youths, and we prefer possible solutions to these challenges that the youths face in their everyday lives. My name, of course, is Blessings Musugu, and for this next hour, I am your delectable host on the show Fafanua Afrika. So sit tight and let's take you through 1 hour of bliss. Now, one of the most exciting things about culture is that it is dynamic, it evolves, it transmutes. It is what meshes a society and gives it meaning. But above all else, it helps society transmit memory from one generation to another. Now, it is the vehicle through which we study the past, absorb the present, and glean the future. In terms of definition, the concept is expansive. Hence, one mean it here to specify a belief and behavioral system and patterns, shared attitudes and values that are central to a people or groups of persons, for lack of a better word to use. Anyways, joining me on this conversation today, I have the honor of introducing Jane Mwangi, a journalist in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you, Jane, for joining me.
Welcome.
It's a pleasure. We also have Jeremiah Egruje, a journalist and musician in Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you, Jeremiah, for being with us today.
It's my pleasure. Hi. How
Hi.
are you doing?
Hi, it's good to have you here. And last but not least, of course, we have Michelle Mulingo, the Yellow World Communications Officer, Bulawayo in Zimbabwe. Thank you, Michelle, for joining us. Okay, so while we wait for Michelle's reception, this is a conversational show. And just to give you guys, a heads up, this is a show that you can air your views, say whatever you want to say. Of course, I'm here to moderate and keep everything in check, but it is conversational. So feel free to air your opinions. Feel free to butt in whenever you want to. Try to interrupt maybe. I will moderate, so we'll just see how that goes. But anyway, once again, this is Fafanua Afrika. And thanks to my guests for being here. Today, we're talking about Westernization, right? The effects, the advantages, the disadvantages alike. And we're going to be starting this conversation immediately by talking about pop culture, as they call it. That's Westernization. So I would like to get your different opinions, whether or not you are pro pop culture or you're against pop culture. So I'm going to start with Jane, of course. What is your opinion? Do you stand for pop culture or are you against Westernization?
I haven't heard your question. Can you rewind?
Okay, sure. So I was saying that we're going to start off by getting each and every opinion of yours. And I want to start by asking, are you pro-Westernization or against Westernization? That's what we're talking about today, Westernization. So I want to know if you are in support of it or you're against it. So what do you think?
Okay. We can first start by understanding what Westernization simply means. It's where we Africans, we are molded by the European countries that came to colonize us. So as for me, I'm against Westernization because it has come to erode most of our Africanicity. So I'm against Westernization.
Jane, also, I would like to ask Jeremiah the same question. Are you pro-Westernization? I mean, I've taken note of the fact that Jane is against Westernization. Jeremiah, what's your opinion?
Okay, hi. So can you just come over that question again?
Okay, so I'm basically just asking because this is going to be more like a debate, and your answer now is going to determine where your stance is, during the course of the conversation. So I'm trying to know, are you in support of Westernization or are you against it completely?
Well, it's kind of a dicey situation here. We're looking at Westernization and we're looking at the pop culture and how things have actually evolved right now. So I would literally pick the 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 evolving part because it has its own plus sides and also bad sides. But it's actually kind of that. So what I'm going to go with right now, I'm going to go with Westernization. Actually,
You are in
the
support.
the culture that the youths actually left for the advanced pop culture.
Okay, so let me just get it straight. You are in support of Westernization. Is that it?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, Michelle, what is your own opinion? Don't forget your stance now is going to determine how this conversation will go. So, Michelle, which side are you on? Michelle, can you hear us? Okay, I think we're going to wait for Michelle to joining. But right now we have Jane. Fantastically, we have Jane against Westernization and we have Jeremiah in support of Westernization. Beautiful. That's all I need. I'm not controversial, but I just need I need us to talk about it from both perspectives. So, Jane, why? Let me start from why are you against Westernization?
Okay. Because Westernization has brought about another perspective of our African heritage. It has made most of our youth forget our Africanicity, which we as Africans we have forgotten our ethic and our norms as Africans, and yet we adapt to a foreign norm and ethics, which I don't support because these Europeans came to colonize us and then settled into our Africans. So like, why do you have to adapt to their norms, and yet we are Africans? So I think I'm against Westernization.
Okay, beautiful. Jeremiah, what is your reason for being in support of Westernization?
Okay, so I am in support of Westernization because there are things that our forefathers did then that actually worked for us as Africans. They use different styles, they use different doctrines and teachings to bring us up in moral conduct and in attitudes and how people have grown to learn societal values, families, upbringing, respect. But I'm actually in support of Westernization because as we are growing in time and in age, tech, things have actually evolved in the way people are seeing things, but we cannot actually come against the fact that we have bad sides and good sides to this Westernization thing. But yeah, in a way, we support the fact whereby in this new light and time and age, Westernization has helped people to see things differently and we do things differently in our time. Thank you.
What is so important about, Jane, this question is for you. What is so important about culture that it has to be maintained?
What is so important about culture is the way we Africans, the way our forefathers fought for the independence, and they brought this cultural heritage into our countries. I think that we are supposed to respect the fact that we have our own culture that we are supposed to be embracing, and the fact that in the future our next generation should find people who embrace their own culture and not a foreign culture, because we as Africans, we're supposed to be proud of our heritage and not. Okay, I'm not like against the Westernization, but the fact that it came to erase our memories and our cultural norms is what I'm against it. Because as we speak by now, the generation we are having at the moment, they barely know about our cultural heritage. And I feel that we should bring back the fact that we should remind people of our Africanicity, or else years to come, then our culture will be eroded and will be forgotten.
Okay, Jane, you made mention of erasing our culture. Now, I would like to ask you on that, hinging on that, right? Is it that the Westerners came to erase the culture intentionally, or is it that Africans are just generally, naturally liberal people to the point that they have now accepted the culture as their own, forgetting their own culture? So, would we blame it on the Westerners for trying to erase our culture? Or would we say that Africans are the ones who are so gullible or susceptible to these, Western ways?
Okay, I can say subconsciously and unsubconsciously, we have eroded our Africanicity. 50% through our right minds and 50% without our own knowledge, because as we see in the media, we youths, we have come to a point where we embrace the international news, like example, the Kardashians, or maybe talk about the football. So we really embrace our very own Africans. So I suppose subconsciously and subconsciously we erode our culture.
Okay. Before I ask Jeremiah, I would just like to say that we have Michelle Mulingo with us finally. Michelle, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Okay, amazing. That means the trio is complete. But anyways, yeah, we're still talking about Westernization, the impact of it, the advantages and disadvantage. Michelle, I'd like to get your opinion before we continue. What do you think about Westernization, and what side are you on? Are you in support of Westernization, or are you against it?
Okay, thank you for that question. When it comes to Westernization and its impact on the African culture, I would say it has both negative and positive sides. The negative side is seen when we now want to copy the Western culture and leave our own culture behind. But then when we look at the good side of the Western culture, we can see that it brought about good things in Africa, such as gender sensitive issues. We now a woman is now viewed as a person, as a normal human being, whereas in our culture a woman is normally viewed as someone whose place is in the kitchen. Nowadays, even us girls, we go to school. Westernization to that. That's my introduction.
Okay, but if I were to ask you to pick a side, what side would you be on? Would you be pro-Westernization or against it?
If I were to pick a side, I would be more on the African side.
Why is that?
Even if you follow the Western culture and everything, one way or the other, you are inclined back to the African culture. Look at it like, if I want to get married, like now, I won't just go to court and get married. I'll go to the African culture, look for my uncles, do the lobola thing and all those things. It's still African culture, so we can't do away with our culture. Our culture is us. It's our life.
Okay, so I have certain pointers here that I would like for us to discuss one after the other, and that includes adopting the Western way of dressing, the language or accent, tribal marks, and I think there is also a history and hairstyles. So I'd like for us to discuss it one after the other. Let's start with tribal marks. Jeremiah, I remember that you were pro-Westernization. What do you think about tribal marks? And I mean, of course, there are still places where it has been done, but somehow it kind of looks like it's going into extinction. But a lot of people will argue with you that tribal marks are what, makes them identify themselves as a culture. What do you think about that?
Thank you so much for bringing this up. Yeah, so this is why I am actually in support of Westernization, because if you look at some certain tribes, yeah, if you look at, sorry to mention the Hausa, I think the Fulanis, you see how the parents have, because they want to identify their kids during birth period, they had to give them different marks on their face. I feel that is not really okay, because, okay, fine, my wife wants to give birth, and after she has given birth, because there are a lot of kids in the hospital, and I want to actually get to recognize my own child, I should have to deface my child because it is culture. I feel that is wrong. I feel that has really added to a lot of issues people are facing. Some people have been stigmatized because of facial marks. Some people have lost the essence of their confidence, in approaching other people. Some people have been made fun of. I feel this is actually wrong and should be revisited. That's why I'm in support of Westernization. Looking at marks, you can see the faces of people these days having different layers and different skillfully drawn marks because I want to identify with my tribe. I feel that has been done by the forefathers and the old generation, the older generation. But I feel moving on, this is not really good. If you want to identify your child, there should be better ways of doing it. I mean, not having to deface yourself in the name of tribe. And, yeah, that is it. Thank you.
Jane, do you agree with that? Jane, are you with us?
Yeah, I'm hearing you.
Okay, so I was saying, do you agree with that? I remember that you were pro-Westernization, and I want to know if you agree with what Jeremiah said, or you are strongly in support of tribal marks and it shouldn't be stopped.
Okay, I disagree with that. I disagree with people being, those marks on their faces, because I feel there's another approach that people can do to identify themselves, not necessarily having marks on their faces. I feel like we should have another approach, another approach to approach that.
Okay. How about Michelle? What is your stance? Michelle, can you hear me? Okay, unfortunately, we lost Michelle again. Hopefully, she can join us before we're done. But, well, tribal mark done. Let's now talk about the accent and the language. Language stroke accent, right? Jeremiah, back to you. What do you think about people losing their languages? You see these days where, let's say out of 7 or 3 or 4 children, none of them, or at least maybe just one of them, can actually speak their dialect, their mother tongue. And some of them will say that it's not exactly necessary because what we communicate with most of the time is English. Africans will say British English, and then some of them will tell you that you cannot lose your language in the process of accepting the Western culture. And that's that. Then there's the accent. There's a lot of, I'm talking about accents, so let me be more. There are people that speak that, that they're trying to force the accent. The Nigerians call it lafa, locally acquired foreign accent. People that have never even been outside the shores of Nigeria that are trying so hard to be British or American. So that is the two aspects that I want us to talk about: the language part and then the accent. Jeremiah, that question was for you. Okay, I don't know what's going on, but while we wait for Jeremiah, Jane, do you want to, you are in support of Westernization, so what do you have to say about the language and accent thing?
Okay, thank you for the question. About the language, I think it's high time we Africans should embrace our local dialect. Like, okay, there's a certain celebrity that traveled, an example, that traveled from Kenya and went to UK. And he said that she's going to change the accent from African to UK.
Okay, well, I think that we're having challenges with our guests. But anyways, you're still watching Fafanua Afrika, and we're talking about Westernization and how Africans especially are embracing more of the Western culture, and in that process, displacing their own culture. Now, people are not saying, they're not saying that it is wrong to accept Westernization. They're not saying it is wrong to have an open mind. But the question is, how liberal should Africans be in accepting the Western culture? And what are the detriments of overly accepting or tilting towards the Western culture? I still have my guests with me and they'll be joining me very shortly. But in the meantime, we have some vox pops, as we like to call it, some opinions of people across the African continent regarding cultural westernization and what they think about it. So we'll go now to the streets to hear what people are going to say, or what people have to say, the youth, of course, about westernization, and then we'll come back to discuss it with the guests. Do stay with us.
So Westernization has impacted the young people in Africa, both in positive and in negative ways. So on the positive, I would like to mention that it has presented the opportunity to the young people to be able to compete on the global community without feeling like they're outcast. It has given them the impetus or the feeling that the sense of belonging rather. Then on the negatives, I would like to mention that most of the young people in Africa have lost their identity, in the sense that they adopted the element of adopt and abandon syndrome, whereby they are adopting the Western life entirely and abandoning theirs entirely as well, whereby what they should do is traditionalizing modernity and modernizing tradition, which is basically an attempt to move towards the Western life without losing your own identity.
Lots of Westernization on African youth. To the best of my knowledge, Westernization has a lot of benefits than the disadvantage parts. When we look at the advantage aspects of Westernization on African youth, fine. Presently in Nigeria, the rate of unemployment is so much, but African youths are now resorting to technology, which is part of Westernization. So they are resorting to technology and looking, for example, when you look at TikTok, a lot of people are engaging themselves in TikTok. A lot of people are engaging themselves in speech making. A lot of people are engaging themselves in a lot of things on the YouTube, on social media, on the internet. So these are branches of Westernization, and you can't find that you can't find all this in those days. You know, in those days, that is why you see when the unemployment rate is so high. You see African youths, you see some youths engaging into criminal activities, like robbery and so many things. But when you look at it today, Westernization has made most Nigerian youth or African youth to be more busy. Bitcoin and whatsoever is part of Westernization. So it has really helped. Westernization has really helped. That is, I'm talking on the impact now. The advantage of it. You know, it has reduced crime.
Thanks for staying with us on Fafanua Afrika. Now, we have been talking about Westernization, the effects, the advantages, and the disadvantages. Now, with African cultures and traditions being heavily influenced by Western cultures for a long time, experts are of the opinion that the preservation of these treasures and traditions has been a very important yet very tricky accomplishment. Hence the need to completely embrace the culture while preserving it for future generations. But of course, as you saw earlier, some of my guests were pro-Westernization while others were not exactly in support of it. Anyways, once again, welcome to Fafanua Afrika. And I have another guest joining me in the house, my own friend, and she is in the studio, fortunately for me. Yeah, so her name is Oluchi Harrison, also known as the Igbo Blondie. Thank you, Oluchi, for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me. I like it when you introduce me as your own friend.
I know, right? Anyways, thank you, Oluchi. Now, we have been talking about Westernization, and of course, I still had my other guests from Kenya, Nigeria, and Zimbabwe, who will also be joining us very shortly. But I want to get your opinion on Westernization, right? If I were to ask you now, are you pro-Westernization or are you against Westernization? I mean, which one would you be in support of?
I wouldn't completely say I'm pro or, completely against it. There are a lot of advantages and a whole lot of disadvantages. I'm more of the person that would say I would take the good and, try to sieve out the bad, because you really can't take everything that Westernization brings. Yes, it brings the upgrade, doing things better, just advancing with the time and the age and technology, but at the same time, there are a lot of flaws that come with Westernization. There's a lot of, negative influence on even the young people, whereas, they're basically just taking on everything they see, even though it's not really right. Some of these things are completely, out of our culture, out of our tradition, out of how we're actually supposed to be. Because if you actually check it, the Westerners actually are more easy when it comes to setting things, setting behavior patterns, setting, they let a lot of things go. And on this part of the world, in this part of the world, we're more, meticulous, we're more cultured. I would like to believe that we're more cultured when it comes to certain things. We're not the type that would just, go with the flow in every single thing. So those are the flaws I would say, yeah, we need to cut it down when it comes to some of these things. But when it comes to the modernization, taking the good, it's always a good thing. So I'm kind of in between.
Very well said, Oluchi. Thank you for the motivational speech. But you have to choose one.
I have to choose one.
Yes.
If I have to really choose one, I'm choosing my African culture, my African heritage. I'm choosing to be not pro-Westernization, basically.
Great. That's what I wanted to hear. Now, because you have chosen the African culture, I want to ask you some questions, right? What do you think about tribal marks?
Tribal marks. Okay. Well, personally, I'm not pro-tribal marks when it comes to the African heritage. I am an Igbo woman, as you can see. So I cannot.
What do you mean, as we can see?
As you can see, I'm one Igbo. I would tell you, I'm an Igbo woman, basically. Okay. So if somebody from the Yoruba land might see it differently because it is part of their culture, part of their heritage. But as an Igbo woman, I personally am not, I'm not keen on, and I know a lot of Yoruba people that are not really keen on the tribal mark. They're not, they don't exactly want to have tribal marks or have their children have tribal marks on their faces. And I feel like maybe that's part of the, the culture or the previous culture and heritage we've had that might lead a little bit of modernization, because not everybody wants to have a cut across their face, especially when it's not something that is personal to them. When people decide to get tattoos these days, they want to say, okay, this means something to me. This is something personal. I'm doing this because I can relate to this. I feel like I'm part of this. So if it's not something the person is drawn to personally, I don't feel like it is something that you would want to just, put a final full stop on your face for life, basically.
I know, right? But thank you so much for that, Oluchi. And before we went on a break, we were talking about language versus accent, or what I say, language stroke accent, right? Jane was explaining something. Unfortunately, the network cut her off. But I want to get Jeremiah's opinion on this. What do you think about, first of all, language, right? With the fact that some people, especially the Gen Zs these days, feel like it's not very important to maintain your accent or your local language, because mostly you communicate with English. That's one. And then there's some people that want to forcefully become British overnight or become American, as the case may be. You see people who have never been across the shores of the country, their respective African countries, but they are trying so hard to be so fluent in other accents and ditching their own dialect or languages. So what do you think about that?
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right. So this is the way I'm going to actually drive on this issue. Yeah. Let me digress for 2 seconds. Now, have you noticed that we
Oh no, I think we lost Jeremiah again, which is unfortunate, but we would still wait to try and see if we can connect with Jeremiah. But we still have Jane with us, and I mean, Jane was trying to say something before the break. So Jane, you have the floor.
Okay. Thank you again for the opportunity. About language, most of our Africans, they're trying as much as possible to adapt their Western language.
Okay, I think that for some reason the network is trying to torture us because we're talking about Westernization, right? We accept, we agree that that is one advantage. But anyways, let's come back to Oluchi since we have her in house. Oluchi, what do you think about language stroke accent?
Well, I think a lot of people need to understand that, being able to speak properly is not necessarily having an accent. You don't have to have a British accent or an American accent to speak English properly. And at the same time, there is really nothing wrong with having an accent that is from your tribe, with having a factor that's from your tribe, because you would listen to, the Russians have Russian accents, and you listen to the French have, French, the French accent, and you don't have a problem with that. So we shouldn't have a problem with hearing an Igbo man sound like an Igbo man, or a Yoruba man sound like a Yoruba man, or, an Hausa man actually have the accent of an Hausa man, because that's where you're from. That's your tribe and heritage. So if you're okay accepting a Western person's accent, you should be very okay accepting your African man's accent. That should be the base. And I feel like most of this also comes from the complex, the mentality, that's colonized mentality, where you feel like what is outside is always better. So you have to be like the people outside, sound like the people outside, look like the people outside. Whereas you have what you have, and at the end of the day, these people actually admire you more when you actually sound Nigerian. When they hear you with your Nigerian accent, they're like, what language is that? They actually like it even more. Take Burna Boy, for instance. That man has, the UK accent generally, because that's where he grew up. But with the advent of, his career and everything, he knows that for him to make an imprint outside there, he has to sound Nigerian, because that's what they want to hear. He actually puts in the effort to sound even more Nigerian than his natural UK accent that would, normally just come out. So I feel like at the end of the day, it boils down to mentality. We need to break that mentality that you feel like you need to sound like the Westerners, or you need to be like them. Be yourself. Take on your tribe with full pride, because they will do that with their own country as well.
Well, thank you for that, Oluchi. I think so many people didn't even know about Burna Boy being born outside there. And for those who are wondering how she knew the history, Oluchi is an entertainment presenter. So, little wonder that she knows all of that. But anyways, thank you for that. We have Jeremiah back. And I think I would like to hear what Jeremiah was saying, because he was so interested in the topic. And unfortunately, the network cut us off. So, Jeremiah, please go ahead.
All right. So, sorry about that issue. So now, trying to buttress my points here, let me just try and skip ahead. So, have you ever wondered when the world leaders, when they meet and have their conference, are you going to have a Chinese man go in his own language, and then Nigerian man is going to enter with Igbo, then somebody from France is going to speak French, and then it's going to be a lot of chaos coming from all sides. You know what I'm saying? Every tribe, every city, every country has their own local language. But moving on, if you want to actually communicate in this modern time, you have to adapt to English. Because if a Chinese man is coming to Nigeria to come and invest, he's not going to come and invest and say in his business, he needs an Igbo man to come and give him Igbo dialect. Speak English and let's get this business done. If you want to do something and you want to actually move forward, in this time that we're in right now, your tribal language is actually very important to you and your tribe and to your own people, but you cannot use that right now. Because even in schools, I can remember in my secondary school days, we used to have this issue whereby we're actually in class and we're trying to talk and communicate, and some guys would just give themselves that click and start speaking their own vernacular Yoruba dialect to themselves. And it actually is very terrible, because everybody cannot relate in the class. In a class where you have, okay, now let me actually take this back to the days in my university. Okay, we used to have this lecturer that he'll be like, I'm sorry if you cannot understand Yoruba, because that is my mother language. So what is going to happen to the rest of us students who are not Yoruba, who probably have different tribes in the classroom? How can, in this modern time now in university, imagine the university lecturer saying, I'm sorry, I can only explain this subject in Yoruba, and he's teaching an English course. You see where I'm heading to? Everything has its good side and has its bad side. But I'm telling you right now, if you are actually trying to look at things right now, I would say it's a no-no for me. It's actually not the mentality, it's how all things have changed. You are no longer using Motorola, you're no longer using Sagem, you're now using iPhone and Samsung. Things have changed. They are still there. But once in a while, you have to, if you want to speak. Right now, we are speaking English. I'm not telling you to speak to me in Yoruba, and I have to think and get an tabita and talk to you in English. You understand? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Well, your point has been well noted. Thank you so much, Jeremiah. Now, before we go ahead, all right, I'd like for us to take a look at what the TWIPs are saying about this. Is Westernization the way forward, or is it a detriment, or is it at our own detriment, and is it making us lose our culture? We'll take a look at Twitter now and see what the tweets are, and then we'll be right back. So Ifrit says, I love it when Twitter intellectuals try to make traditional African religion look like the victim of Westernization. Like I have been saying, if the traditional practices were so good, believe me, we wouldn't have left them. Look at Asia, Buddhism, or Asia, Asia, Buddhism and Taoism is still doing great. Okay. Ademola says, you can be African and be civilized. You can be Indian and be civilized. You can be Arab and be civilized. Civilization is not Westernization. Okay, I think there's another angle that we'll need to talk about. So my guests need to take note. Chani says, what I am looking for is modern Africanization, not Westernization. I want to be an African, a modern one, an African that can relate meaningfully to the rest of the world, not an African lost in the jungle looking for gracious people to give me a sense of direction. Okay, all right, that's quite heated. Varia says, in Muslim countries, people understand Westernization as imitating European fashion and culinary traditions. Instead of adopting Europe's technical and scientific skills, we prefer to adopt their extravagant ways of amusement. I think there's another angle to look at it from. Pan-African Review says, with increasing Westernization, the influx of processed foods and the fact that many families are run by two busy working parents unable to cook healthy meals regularly, there has been an increase in the number of cases of uterine fibroids in Africa. Okay, that's according to Pan-African Review. And our letter says, I wash my hair like once every other month or longer if I'm wearing wigs constantly. Before Westernization and everything being about money, it wasn't encouraged to wash your hair more than once a month. They only started telling us that was best so they can sell shampoo. Okay. All right, that's also interesting. Okay, these were the tweets, and I think that I'm sure my guests will have a thing or two to say. Let's start with the last tweet. What do you think about the Westerners selling their ideas to us and making us feel like that is the best way to go? Because, I mean, that's like the summary of what she said. She used to wash her hair once a month and before the, or twice a month. And before then, it was like once a month or even once a year, you know. But what do you think, Igbo Blondie, about that? Oluchi?
I honestly do think if you feel like it's a Westernization, they're just trying to sell their shampoo, that's the top of your hair. Now don't wash it. When it starts to scratch you, by the time you hit like 2-3 times, it's not somebody that will send you to wash it. Now you can always say maybe you don't want to use their product. Maybe you'd probably used normal soap before and all of that, but you cannot say that it was not necessary to wash your hair, because even you know what dandruff can do to you. You know what the hair itching, your hair smelling, and all of that can do to you. But if you feel like it's the Western problem, no problem. Don't wash it.
Okay, thank you for that, Oluchi. Jeremiah, now what is your own take on the world evolving to a point where we now have two busy parents that can hardly make a decent meal for their children in the house?
Okay, sorry, I'm going to have to ask you to say that again. Please take it one time.
Okay, so one of the tweets read that this age and time, we now have two busy parents that hardly can make a decent meal. That's if they ever even try to make a decent meal, because they're always so busy working. And according to that person, that is an effect of Westernization. What do you think about that?
Okay, beautiful.
I feel like Jeremiah is about to attack this.
But I would say, sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Jeremiah, we can hear you. Oof. Okay, so while we wait for Jeremiah, we still have Jane. Jane, what do you think about that? Did you get the question, or do you want me to repeat myself?
No, I've heard your question very well.
Great. Okay.
Okay, parents being busy. I think we have copy-pasted the Western part of it. I feel like with the technology we are having at the moment, everybody is just busy. And parents being busy and not being there for their kids, I feel like it's not greatly contributed by the Westernization part of it. I feel like it's us opting, priorities really matter. I feel like parents should create time for their children and have that, create time for their children, and they stop being too busy, because with the Westernization and technology and the lifestyle that the Westernization is bringing upon us, it will greatly it influences the generation Z a lot. So I feel like parents should have time and create time for their kids so that they can be able to be at par with the technology as well as the Westernization.
Okay, quickly, Oluchi, how do you think that Westernization has affected the relationship between the old and the young people in Africa?
Well, in Africa, we will say because, technology has also advanced, and most of this technology actually came from the western part of the world. And, before now, there's more communication, vocal communication, actual physical communication. But at the moment, we're more of, on our phones, communicating via, all the social media apps and not really focusing on the present time. The older generation were more present when it comes to, communication. They were more about meeting people, more about on Sunday, you go visit your family members, go visit your friend, you eat Sunday rice and all of that. But these days, everybody's like, what, I'm too busy. And most times they're too busy on their phones, not really busy. There are times when you're busy with other things, but most times we're more, connected via the internet than physically. And it has kind of like caused that disparity. Now, a lot of young people these days want their parents to treat them how the Western parents treat their kids, of which most times I wouldn't really subscribe to, that kind of training. A lot of young people would not understand when their parents give them certain advice or, are strict with them to a certain point because they feel like, no, it doesn't happen outside. What I see online, people don't, parents don't treat their kids like that, and they want that kind of treatment, forgetting that those types of, training also have their disadvantages, which are quite, kind of like a lot if we actually look at it, how it actually is. So basically, I feel like that's the disparity that has been caused with the older generation and the younger generation. It's just more physical on this side and more, internet-y on this side, basically.
Okay, also, Jeremiah, now, all the points have been taken, but do you think there is a way to balance it up? Looking at the advantages and disadvantages. Jane, do you want to answer that? Jane, are you there?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, did you get my question, or do you want me to repeat myself?
Repeat.
Okay, so I was saying that with all the points being taken, everything noted, how do you think we can create a balance between, because obviously if you look at Westernization, it's not like it's all bad. There are advantages to it. And of course, there's also the flip side, the disadvantages. But how do you think that a balance can be created?
Okay, how we can balance about Westernization and everything is we create time to understand our African heritage. We as Africans, we are supposed to go back to the drawing board and get to understand our Africanicity. And Westernization, it has both the good and the bad part of it. But I think we should concentrate more on the good things, because you've seen it has brought about changes in the technology where various innovations have been made. So I just feel like we as Africans, we're supposed to concentrate more on the positive and take that chance of embracing ourselves into positivity and help this Westernization to help our Africanization and model it to become of good advantage to us. So I think we should at least try to understand and get to know the good and the bad, and concentrate more on the positive than on the negative.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for that, Jane. Oluchi, do you think that there's a way to balance it up?
Of course there is a way to balance it. We first of all need to understand that Westernization is not modernization or civilization. If you want to be modern or civilized, advance and do more, you don't have to be completely Western. Let's not forget that the Westerners, at the end of the day, are doing things according to their tradition, their heritage, what they have grown up with over the years, the kind of things they have passed down from generation to generation. And it has nothing to do with our African culture or African heritage. Now, when they have technology, on the other hand, when they have all the advents of tech and all of that, that on the other hand has nothing to do with their tradition. That is just modernization and civilization. So when we can take civilization, we can take modernization from the Western culture, but we do not have to take their own traditions, their own heritage, or their own culture and the way they handle things. Basically, it's kind of like take the good, which is the modernization and civilization, and you can as well leave their culture to them. Let us face our, our cultures, our heritage. It doesn't mean you have to be a traditionalist or you have to be, just the way it worked in the 90s or in the 80s or in the 70s. But at the same time, you're modernizing, you're growing, you're changing, but you're not losing your heritage. That's basically it. Balance it out.
But I think Nigerians will say balance, baby.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Oluchi Harrison. Oluchi Harrison is a TV presenter and a content creator from Lagos, Nigeria. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We also had Jane Mwangi, a journalist in Nairobi, Kenya. Thank you, Jane. And also Michelle Molingo, a Yellow Ward Communications Officer, Bulawayo, Zimbabwe. Unfortunately, we couldn't get Michelle to speak with us. And we also had Jeremiah Egruje, a journalist and musician in Lagos, Nigeria. Thanks again, Jeremiah.